and welcome to the Storied Human. This is Lynn Thompson. I'm back with Susie Spell for the second part of our extensive interview about holistic healing, becoming more in tune with other quantum forms of healing, becoming more in tune with consciousness. We delve into the spirit world, shamanism, the special role of nature in healing. There are so many things that Susie has to tell us that she needed two parts. So I definitely talked to her for a good long time, and I divided the interview into two parts. So this second part, we delve more into animals and nature and the importance of connecting with nature for healing. And Susie fills us in on her future, her plans for really offering like a total holistic approach to healing people. And I just love seeing and hearing about her transformation. And I love thinking about the good that she's doing and will continue to do in the world. So enjoy part 2 with Susie Spell. Thank you. I think we're going to have, this is going to be a two-parter, I think.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Yeah.
Because we're on a roll.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something about animals. When I did my first shamanic journey, my cat showed up. Like, your spirit animal is supposed to show up, but it was my cat. And I had him for 16 years. He was like a major part of my life from when I was 8 till I was 24. He was this big fat tomcat. And my parents, like, we almost lost him. He was such a wild thing. You know, he was like probably impregnating like all the female cats in the vicinity. And he would get in fights and come home like half torn up. And I'd be like a wreck, you know, because I loved him desperately.
Right.
We fixed him up. And then finally my parents were like, well, maybe we should fix him. So they did. And then he was much more mellow. But one thing about him was he had such presence. Whenever he didn't like someone who came to our house, we would be a little more careful around that person.
Mm-hmm.
And when he liked someone, we were like, yeah, we knew that person was good. But sometimes he would like someone who didn't like cats. Right. And he would come up on the couch and he would sit by them and look at them. And they would pet him and be a little unsure, but somehow they liked him. So he had like this presence. I haven't had a cat like him since. And now I'm really allergic and I can't have cats, and it makes me very sad. But he came to me in the journey. And, journeying is just, you just go to a more relaxed, it's like being hypnotized. You go to a more relaxed place. And for me, it's really easy. Like I'm hypnotized really easily. So I found journeying really easy. So he came to me and I know it sounds funny. Like, of course I would want him to come, but I hadn't thought of him in like ages. And I was so happy to see him. I was so happy to see him in the way you would be if something happened that you didn't do yourself.
Right.
So that's what convinced me I was like, I didn't do that. I wouldn't have had that feeling, and I was so happy to see him. I was so glad that he was with me on my journey. And I was cracking up because he was the kind of cat that would go with me outside. Like, everybody cracked up.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't leave my side. We would go outside when I was a little girl and he would stay with me. And my mother said he was my familiar. I was like a witch.
Yeah.
Familiar. Yeah. But he was like a special soul to me. And so I said to the woman leading the shaman class, I said, is it ever a household pet? And she said, not usually, but if he was special, if he was like supposed to be with you. And when I meditate, I see my mother in a Cotswold cottage. She always loved those Cotswold cottages because you can sort of make whatever environment you want.
Right. Yeah.
World. So she made this beautiful thatched roof cottage, and I see her by a fire and she's holding my cat.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just such it reassures you so much. It makes you feel good. Anyway, so what was the point? Animals. So animals are so important, and you love animals. And I wanted to say, we had a poodle, a big poodle, a standard poodle, who also was not like a dog. She was like a soul. People just were so in love with her. Poodles sort of demand your attention, and if you don't want to give a lot of attention, you're kind of in trouble because she really wants to interact with you all the time. And we joined the Quaker church for a little while, and I really still love it very much. So in order to do that, to become members, they come to your house, and there's like a little council, and they talk to you, they ask you why you want to join. And so she was part of that. And at one point we prayed, which is really, in the Quaker religion, we're just very quiet together. It's like Christian meditation. Nobody calls it that, but that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Doing that. And she came into the room and she bowed down. She bowed down. Like, and everybody was like, oh, isn't that cute? And I'm like, no, she freaking feels it.
Yeah.
She's part of it.
Right.
And I just wonder if you have that feeling about animals, like that.
Oh, yeah.
That spiritual connection.
Oh, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right?
That's a whole other episode.
So I recently, because I kept thinking, I want to communicate with my animals. Like, how can I communicate with them? And not only that, but it's a whole side story too, right? I'm on this mission. I feel like with our health, there's so many things, and we're so cruel to animals. And there's a grief around what's happening with animals in the factory industry and all of that. Maybe they have messages for us too. And so I bought this little thing on Udemy that is an animal communication course.
I love it.
Because I'm like, but I have a cat now. I was trying to look and show you a photo, but I have a cat who became ours. He was a feral cat, but now he's just, we say every day he gives a report to God. However, whatever you want to say, God is right. He finds every day there's a patch of sunshine that comes in the kitchen, and he goes and he sits in the middle and he just looks up, and we're like, it's his daily report to God.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And then, so as we're doing this whole paranormal,
what's his name?
His name is Wiley. And he now has an Instagram account, but it's Wiwey Cyrus, Wiwey. Wiwey Cyrus. He has his own Instagram, which he's going to get better about posting. And I feel like he is, he's just different. Like something's different about his spirit.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I think it'd be really cool to like get an animal communicator who actually really knows what they're doing.
Right.
To communicate, to be the medium between us. Right. But then we got a dog. Her name is Sophie, and she's a bit of a maniac. But as we were doing this whole like paranormal exploration, all this stuff, especially in the throes of it, when it really first, she would like growl and she'd perk up and she'd watch like she was like tracking something in the room that wasn't there. And I was like, and even my daughter and my kids would say, look, she's looking at something. She sees something.
Yeah.
Or, and I was like, what? She does. And so then I ended up buying this book called Psychic Animals,
Yeah.
And
I've heard this though. I've heard this from a lot of people that their cats, they run after something that's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get spooked by something they don't see. Dogs, are definitely looking at something.
Right. And they don't have all the crap that we have, right? All this like culture and upbringing and all this stuff. They're just in the moment, I mean, they're just, they're in the now.
It's lovely.
And yeah, so
they don't live long enough though. That's the hard part.
I know. They're just in our lives for a moment, but, which, that's how it is.
There's just so many things that you're bringing up for me, but I remember like when you do journey and you get a spirit animal, they bring usually a message or they symbolize something, but you can also communicate with an entire species. Oh. And I've read books that have messages from the whales, messages from the dolphins. It's incredibly powerful to read them because they embody, like, especially whales and like I'm obsessed with dolphins.
I am too.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
I never understood why, but now I know more about the brain waves that they live in, the playfulness and the love, but they have messages for us, and it makes you hurt to see what people are doing to animals because you understand that they're so alive and they're so aware, and their species. I mean, you maybe can't. I mean, I know animal communicators talk to an individual, but you can also. It's really sort of in the shamanic tradition and the Native American tradition that you talk to the species. Yeah. So you talk to, bear or you talk to deer, but, I didn't even get to the most powerful shamanic thing we had, but I mean, it's hard to believe even as I say it. We took a Huichol shamanism. It was a weekend course, and that's from Mexico. And it's a tradition in Mexico, and their special animal is the deer. And so they do a lot of rituals talking to the deer, and the deer looks after them and they look after the deer. And the guy that taught it is from Brooklyn. Originally, he's from Brooklyn. And his story is amazing. It's amazing. When he was like 18, he started having these dreams of Mexico. And this really old man was telling him to come there, that he was supposed to come there. And his name is Brant Secunda. And he's wonderful. If you ever want to look up I forget what he called, Dancing Deer Foundation. Anyway, so he was like, this is crazy. This is crazy, but the dreams didn't stop. So he decided to listen to them, and he got on a bus and he went to Mexico, to where he thought he was supposed to go, this village. And he just had a name, and he kept asking where it was. And they took him there, and it was like 3 days of hiking through the mountains. Oh, and he finally got there, and he's like, I must be out of my mind. But he met this really old, wizened guy. He was like 103 when he met him. And the guy said, I've been waiting for you. You took so long, and he definitely trained. He said, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to be my grandson. You're supposed to carry this on. And he just, I guess he was young enough to believe it. Right. And he trained in this tradition of Huichol. It's Huichol, Huichol shamanism, for the next 3 years. And the older man died, and Brant has been teaching these courses ever since. And they're incredibly powerful. We took some just that one weekend, and it really impacted us. But the most amazing one was when we did prayer sticks. So we took threads and we thought about something we wanted, like somebody who wanted to help, or something we wanted to heal in ourselves, or just something, just a lot of intention as we wrapped the stick. So we all did that. We said a prayer, and he did a lot of things with like candles and looking into the flame and thinking. So we were all in kind of a meditative state with our sticks. And we filed out of this beautiful round room where we had our classes, and we filed down the stairs. Now, you're not going to believe this, but I swear it happened. Waiting at the bottom of the stairs was a deer, a female deer. She was waiting for us. Now, this is the woods, there are deer, but she was literally waiting for us. And none of us freaked. Amazing. None of us freaked because we're all in like this meditative state. And so she waited for all of us to pass her, and she joined the line. And she followed us into the woods. This is like one of the most amazing things, because this was part of the ritual was to the deer, and the deer would help us. She followed us into the woods. She stayed at a respectful distance, and we planted our prayers. We said more prayers, and we came back. So the thing for me is, I think things that hit people as crazy, right? It's just science that we haven't discovered yet. And when I say science, I mean, like Taoism. The more they find out about Taoism, the more they realize it describes the way the universe works. Right. So there's just like a level of knowledge that we don't have yet. It's not crazy. So for me, you can communicate with a species, and the species can hear you and send a representative. And that's just how we're connected. So for me, it's not so crazy. But at the time, I was a little bit whacked. Like, I was like, how did this happen? So,
but what happens is when things like that happen, for me, it's like I have this, I feel like I kind of naturally respond with this like childlike wonder and amazement and excitement. Yeah. And, but some people don't respond that way, but if you can try to cultivate that a little bit, the beauty in this life you're living right now will get so much better.
That is such a great point. I have that so much now. Mm-hmm. And it kind of hurts when you crash into somebody who doesn't have that.
And there's a lot of,
we talk about that too. It's like being overly, quote unquote, overly sensitive. I've always been overly sensitive, which I think is BS. I think most people aren't sensitive enough.
Right.
And my son is like that too. And so for me, my experience in the world is that, and it took me a long time to identify this, but my experience is that the world is very harsh and hurtful. And I get hurt a lot by people. But I embrace it because this is the way people should be. What you just described is so beautiful. It's the way people should be. They should stay childlike. And that's why you love dolphins, because they're childlike and playful. And they have this energy. And then the whale is more, I forget the brainwave, but it's lower. It's like not lower, it's deeper. So it's like the whale is in a dream state. The whale is much more like meditative. And I just want to say to people, have you ever wondered why no whale has ever attacked a human? Like, have you ever thought about how big these whales are? And humans go up to them and the whale like looks at them.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about what that means? And dolphins too, they don't attack you ever. Have you ever thought about what that means about their consciousness? They're special. They're sentient.
Very
They're
special.
aware.
And, and they go and they travel by those Schumann resonances and whatever that is. But,
they do? The whales do?
Yeah. And you know what I was just reading, what was it? Or maybe it was something I was watching. God, there's so much that I'm like constantly inundating my brain with that it's hard to.
Me too. I can't keep up with it. I can't keep up with it.
But
I'm on a Facebook group called the Schumann Resonance.
Oh, really?
They talk about the fluctuations and does anybody feel it? And watch out, there's solar flares. And had anxiety last week off the charts. Wow.
Yeah, not long ago there was a solar flare, and all of us in the house were just like, ugh, blah. And I was like, maybe there's a solar flare or something. I mean, just off the cuff said it. My husband said there was. I saw it on the news, and I was like, oh my gosh. But the whales, there was a story that I just recently heard of. Somebody was doing some work, New Zealand or something, and they wanted to know about a flower. They had seen this flower all over, and they asked one of the elders, like somebody who, is part of one of the indigenous tribes or whatever, about this flower. What was the name? And I don't know the name, but they said, we know that flower, that when it opens, the whales, it was the animal communication thing I was doing. The whales are migrating, and the indigenous people in that area go down the mountain. The women go down the mountain to the shore, and they sing as the whales are going by.
Oh.
So they know that when I get the chills thinking about it, I know what they said. They know when that flower opens, it's time to go sing to the whales.
I love that.
As they're passing by.
I love that so much.
So, and who figured that out? I don't know. And even
I know that's like the wisdom that comes there. There's such wisdom, old wisdom. Yeah. It's wonderful.
But we've closed ourselves off to all of that. And, one of the people that I love reading, I have his book, of course, I haven't read it all, is Ted Andrews. He's passed away now. I don't know if you know him, but he has a whole book. It's called Animal Speak. And it's all about the different messages that species and different kinds of animals have for us.
Wow.
He does a lot with sound healing and how to connect with your spirit guides and all that stuff.
I love that.
I was going to tell you, you're talking about Quaker, and I just started reading. I guess I'm revealing just how crazy I am. I guess.
I feel like I am too. Yeah.
But there's a woman that when I got into like figuring out elementals, like what was all that about?
Oh, I totally am into elementals.
Yeah.
Totally.
There's a woman named Atala Toy, and she has written a couple of books, and she was a Quaker, and she talks about meditation and how they got into how she got into yoga and meditation and all of this stuff. I don't know much about Quakers, but that was part of her story. But she can communicate with trees and the natural world, maybe not necessarily animals, but nature,
the elementals.
Mm-hmm.
I just read about the different elementals, and I used to sit on a rock in the middle of the woods behind my house, and I would feel what I called the fairies. I didn't see them, but I could feel them. Nobody told me there were fairies. Nobody raised me that way. I just could feel them, and I would sing to them. I'm always singing in nature. It's just like a thing. And what's interesting is in shamanism, they teach you chants. You chant a lot. And that's also good for your health, right? It vibrates your body.
Let's say the vibration of it.
That whole connection. But what was I saying? Oh, but then I recently learned there's different kinds. I'm on the Facebook group for Dolores Cannon.
Oh,
and she does those books about awakening. And I've really enjoyed it because it's filled in pockets of my knowledge. She talks about the different elementals, about sprites and brownies and gnomes and the difference, and pixies. And it sounds a little crazy, but I read the descriptions and I was like, yeah, I was singing to the pixies. That's what I was singing to. Not fairies, pixies, because they hang out in the woods, and I definitely felt them. So people, you just wonder what the world would be like if we were raised to, from the moment we were little, to trust these feelings and to cultivate these awarenesses and to live in a different way, like more in harmony.
Right. And there's something to be said about children till they're about 6 or 7 are much more open to all that. Even at University of Virginia, they have a parapsychology department, and there's someone there who studies past lives, like who researches past lives.
They remember until a certain age. Yeah.
Right.
My niece did that. One Christmas, she got all excited. She saw Notre Dame on the TV, and she got really excited. She jumped up and down. And I've had material channeled for me that said I was a monk. I was a French monk, and I used to spend a lot of time writing, like copying manuscripts alone. It was a solitary life. And that just felt, I don't even know how to explain how real that felt, because I was obsessed with French. I always studied French, and I have beautiful, like careful handwriting. I took calligraphy.
Right.
And so they say you return, things that you did before come easily to you. But that just made sense. And I like to be alone. But then the message was, you shouldn't be alone as much as you are. That's an old habit. Try this life to come out of it. So I preface all that by saying my little niece, who was like 2.5, almost 3, jumps up and down and says, I was there with Nini. Nini is what she calls me. Yeah. She remembered being in Notre Dame with me.
Interesting. But
and nobody took her seriously. They all laughed. I was the only one in the room that said, yeah, I was there. You bet I was there.
Yeah, it's a message to the adults to maybe.
It was amazing to me. There were like 10 or 12 people in the room, and they were like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, where would your mind have to be to go, oh, ha, ha, ha? This is a very smart little girl, very verbal. She knew. She was all excited because she had been to that church. And she told me other stories too. She goes, well, that was when you were in my belly. When she was tiny, she told me, well, that was when you were in my belly. And when I used to hold her as a baby, she would rub my shoulder like a mom.
Yeah.
Like it was so freaky. And everyone talked about it. It's like she knew me when she was tiny in the crib. She knew me and I knew her.
Yeah.
And then she told me I knew her mother too. She said, your mother, my mother and you, mommy and you, were my babies. So they have these memories, but you can't carry them forever, right? You have to forget them because you have work to do in this life. But I was so amazed by her. And when I went to a psychic like many years ago, they said, she's the oldest soul in your family. Mm-hmm. My niece is the oldest soul. And I wasn't surprised at all. I'm like, yeah, she's way ahead of me. She's got it going on.
Right, right. And so wouldn't it be fun if the adults that had young people could keep a journal or keep something so that those memories, so that later you can look at it and make connections, or, you know what I mean? That would be a message to the people who are adults now to be open-minded to that kind of stuff and really just keep record of it, And my daughter, when she was born, my friend, the one that looked at me like, I'm so sorry for you. And the one that I know her mom was coming to join us during the ceremony. When she came to visit my daughter, when she was just born, she was like not even 24 hours old. She was holding her and looking at her, and she goes, she seems so much older than she is. And I said, doesn't she? Even the nurses would say to me, she's an old soul. And I was like,
they can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. And then even growing up when she was young, people would say, she's an old soul, isn't she? I mean,
Jessie had that too. I know exactly what you mean. She had it from the moment we saw her. It was the way she looked. It was her gaze. Yeah. She was so serious. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she had such a, I don't know. I don't see auras, but I feel things. I'm one of the people, I just feel everything. Right. And she always felt so receptive and aware. She just seemed different. She just seemed different. And the connection that we had, everybody saw it. and no, and they just said, oh, isn't that nice? And I'm like, no, this is like lives connection, like
Right. And how old is she now?
she's 33 now.
Yeah. Does she remember any of that, or is she into any of this kind of past life?
I think if I told her, she would remember.
Yeah.
And she wants to go to a medium because she really misses my mom so much.
Oh.
And she's getting messages and feeling like she wants to know more about that. So yeah, she's still, because she's so old, she's a 6th level old soul in the, I don't know if you ever heard of the Michael material, Michael stuff, the Michael teachings. I don't hear much about it anymore, but it really shaped my understanding of how we ascend as souls, that there's different soul levels. And it was so lovely to have like a system to think about things in. And the way they explained it was, you would never judge somebody who's in 1st grade. You would never judge them for not knowing what you know in 8th grade. They're just on like a whole other level. Right. And so it just helps you understand people. I just loved it. I loved it. And it's a psychology, like, what kind of soul are you? Like, it read me, it read my husband. But the funny thing is, I forgot about this. When I did this reading, I hadn't had kids yet. And it said, yeah, you're going to have a little girl when you're about 36. And she's going to be this, this type. Like, they have sage, scholar. It's similar. Other systems are similar. Sage, scholar, artisan, those kinds of things. But they're really interesting. Mm-hmm. And they said, she'll be a scholar. No, she'll be an artisan, but she has I forget what they call it. It's almost like a twin soul, but she has a twin soul of scholar. So that will affect her. And she'll be, she'll be full of energy, and she'll be really artistic. And then you'll have a son like 3 years later. And that's exactly what happened.
Interesting.
Like, I think they were off on the 36. I don't think I had Catherine until I was 37, almost 38. They were a little bit off on that. And then I had Brendan at 40 and a half. And their personalities are very much what they said. My husband's extremely an artisan. I'm a scholar, big time. I mean, it's just kind of freaky, but we're an old soul family, but we're not as old soul as my niece.
Right.
Because there's levels. There's levels.
Right. Right. There is. I read
It's really important to understand what being an old soul is, because being an old soul means you don't give a shit sometimes. Excuse me. Because it doesn't matter. And if you don't know you're an old soul, you're just going to think you're lazy. Right. But you're not lazy. It's like you've been there, done that. And you're like, you know what? I'm not even going to fight that fight, because I know it doesn't matter. So you have to understand everybody's different. Like, younger souls have way more energy, way more righteous anger, way more activity in the world. And mature, it's so interesting. This, mature souls are often psychologists, therapists. They're often mature souls because they're trying to figure it out. And so, I mean, not that that's real. It's just a fun way to look at,
I read a book called Lightworker that's similar to that, like looking at the different levels of light workers. Are you a light worker? If you are, what level of light worker might you be?
That's so cool.
So, and maybe it was based some on the Michael teachings. I'm not sure.
Well, what I liked about it was I'll tell you, I don't even know if I really believe it all, but I find it interesting to think about the world that way. And the thing I carried away from it was, I forgive people for how they act, because I just say, well, they're just working it out. They're, a young soul, or, they're doing this. I just see people on different paths in a way that I didn't. Like, I give people a break in a way that I didn't before. So if that's all it did for me, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think
I'm not sure. I'm still not sure about this stuff. I'm still
and I've had that same feeling. And I just think of it like this. And I've always had a little bit of a removal feeling similar, is that we each have our own soul journey. Our soul is here to learn whatever it is, and everybody has their own journey. And so I think of it that way a little bit, and I remember this just reminded me that back in the day when I was in public health, I was seeing a woman who had come from Mexico. I had a lot of Hispanic patients, and she was literally about to give birth, and she had all these open wounds on her legs and stuff. And I said to the interpreter, why does she have these wounds? Why is she all scraped up? And she looked at me, she went, Susie. And I was like, what? She goes, she literally just came across the border, like literally just came across the border
Oh
and
my
came to
gosh.
North Carolina, like probably in the last 24 hours. And a lot of people in North Carolina, especially it's a, very conservative kind of place, can be, are, look at immigrants in a certain way. But the way I immediately felt was, imagine that the shared human experience of having a baby, like wanting to birth your child on ground that's safer, has more opportunity, and you risked your life and their life to get to that place. Like what courage that must take, and we're all part of the human, what if there weren't these arbitrary boundaries, you know?
I love that so much. You start to touch that. I have well, I actually just closed it because I have too much going on, but I had a page where I tried to just put on Facebook, where I tried to just put inspiring things. The name of the page was "We Are Not Separate."
Yeah.
People it's an illusion that we're separate.
It is an illusion.
And the more you can touch that connection, the happier you'll be. And the more you'll spread, like every time you, like you said, make eye contact, have a pleasant interaction. Every time you do that, you spread this light and this connection that, will continue from person to person, and you get it back. You feel good. It's just this craziness that we're, like you said, we're in boxes and we're so overworked and we're so thinking that this is really how the world is, when we are not separate at all. It's just this terrible illusion. We're all connected. And I love that you had that, because not everybody would think that, right?
Right. And, I went to, and which is so not like me. I follow Anita Moorjani, which she wrote the book called Dying to Be Me. And then another one, which we touched on earlier about talking about being empathic, I think is what you're really talking about when you said you were sensitive. And she wrote a book, it's kind of new, called Sensitive is the New Strong. But so last December, she was doing her first live in-person event since like the pandemic. And I went, it was in Sedona last December.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was amazing. But she described us all connected in this kind of way, which I thought was really nice. Imagine a disco ball, right? And we're all those little pieces of the disco ball are on there, and each shines its own light, and each has its own, like you're the individual little tile, but all those little tiles make the ball.
I love that.
So we're all part of the disco ball.
I love that. You can see it. You can see the light coming out.
Right.
I love that.
So I thought, well, that was a good way to think of that. We're all connected, but we're all individual. We're all individual expressions of that larger thing, whatever we want to call it.
Like drops, like we're all the ocean.
Right. Yeah.
Like they've used the ocean as that analogy.
Right. Yep. And I think what you were saying before, this is how I've come to sort of think about it. All these things, when you listen to whatever teacher it is, learning about the Michael teachings or the light work or the different levels, like our human brains need to be able to like understand it, understand whatever that larger concept is, and some of these ways are just different ways that whatever resonate with you can understand it. Right. I think that's kind of what's going on.
And I love that you're seriously devoted to understanding this. I mean, you've read all these books and you're treading this different path. And it's really that when you live that way, when you understand it, then you can have a more fulfilling life for yourself, but you can also, as you are finding out, be a better healer, be a true healer on different levels. If my feeling is you're healing on different levels or you will be, than ever before.
Yeah. And even, so I'm drawn to reading all kinds of stuff, right? And I'm reading a book now written by a cardiologist who went into integrative medicine and just talks about stress, and all these different things that impact us, and how I was just reading a section on gratitude and how just being grateful, and even in your daily life, like walking on the ground, looking, I tell people to, even if you just take one mindful minute or moment to look at a leaf and to look at all the veins in the leaf, turn it over, and just imagine all the beauty in that one piece of nature, right? That
I love that.
to just take a second, and because that is actually healing. People who do those practices have less heart disease, less clogged arteries. So for me, it's bridging the two, like, okay, what does that mean for our physical human body?
You are killing me. You're reminding me so much of my friend Sandy Cohen. She's getting a master's in public health.
Oh, really?
And she does a podcast you have got to listen to. You probably should be a guest on it. It's called Inner Peace to Go.
Oh.
And what she loves the most is backing things up with science, like what you just described. Like it's just so illuminating to hear her talk and to hear you talk. When we back something up with science, people will listen to us.
Right.
That's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it makes people like able to connect with it, because that's how our society is now.
Right.
But there's a podcast, when I first started this, like taking pictures and everything, right? A friend of mine I worked with said, my dog always goes and barks at this tree, and I think something's going on in my backyard. She lives in the heart of St. Augustine. So I was like, let me go take pictures back there. So I went and took pictures back there, and it is freaking amazing what's going on in her backyard. So I thought it was so fascinating, and she's like staging everything, like everyone get out, But she sent me this, a link to a podcast. It was new at the time, and it's not so new now. She's been around a couple of years, and you should listen to her too. It's backing things up with science, and sometimes not. But her name is Dr. Amy Robbins, and she has this podcast called Life, Death, and the Space in Between, the Space Between. Wow. So she has on all these people like Edom Alexander, who had a near-death experience, a lot of near-death experiencers, people who have made communication devices to communicate with spirit. And she's a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And so what happened to her one day is, as she was sitting there with a client, she had messages come through, like she became, a medium. So she was trying to figure out what this was all about. And she has this podcast where she has all these wonderful people on talking about all the science of it, and it's a way too. Sounds like your friend Sandy,
I love it. Because it really does reach more people that way.
Yeah.
And she likes to be able to tell people, well, this is science backed. This is these practices. What you just said is what she recommends all the time, are these practices of gratitude and practices of being in nature, more like ways to honor yourself, give yourself that peacefulness, the inner peace to go. Like she's actually a life coach, and she specializes in women and men who are burnt out and their careers are everything. And she wants to get them back to a place where they can have that harmony and that, more of a balance. And it's definitely like her thing. She used to be a celebrity interviewer, and she worked for out in LA. She worked really hard for so many years. It was like a grind, and she drank way too much wine. She said there was always wine. I was always drinking. Now she's sober. She's, did it herself.
Right.
And, she tells this story. It's her story. I'm not giving away anything. And now she has this whole different, again, I love these transformations where she said, she did it. She got herself out of that rat race. She found some peace. She's backing it up with science, and now she's going to share it. So that's a wonderful way,
right,
to heal other people.
Right. And I love it. So even when you're talking about things like meditation, so in my coaching curriculum, introduced me to a woman who's a Harvard researcher. She had an injury, had to do some stretching, thought, well, I'll do yoga. She said the yoga lady was talking about all these benefits of meditation on the brain. And she thought, is that true? So then she went and did studies. She did studies, CAT scans, and you can actually change the structure of your brain. Certain parts. I've heard that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but that's the bridging the science and the practices that are ancient wisdom, right? I mean, just ancient wisdom. And your body has that wisdom too. So your body has healing capabilities. And so, that's one thing that looking at the science of that, looking at the science of earthing and grounding, the work of the Heart Math Institute, they look at blood pressure and blood viscosity, which is stickiness, right?
Right.
After you've been grounded for 20 or 30 minutes and your blood viscosity goes down, blood pressure goes down. So these are things that our physical body responds to.
Yeah. She just did an article. She also writes articles for Shondaland, which is so cool. She did an article on the vagus nerve and the 5 ways you can optimize, the stress relief that your vagus nerve can give you. Mm-hmm. You can relax it. You can do breathing. Like one of the simplest ones is the breathing, which I've heard a couple places. Anyone can do it. Like they can do it right now. Just take longer to exhale, inhale deeply, take a moment and take longer to exhale. And it relaxes you. And I think that's so beautiful and science-backed, which I love. But I wanted to mention one thing. I did have breast cancer in 2018. And I was really fortunate because I had a very intuitive doctor who, even though my biopsies were negative, had a feeling. She was annoying me at the time, but she had a feeling that something was in there. She didn't like the look of the edges of some of the cells. So she literally made me go under surgery to get a bigger sample. And it was still negative. And I was really not real pleased with her because I didn't understand. I didn't understand what she was doing. Now I'm like, I love you. Thank you so much.
Right.
So she still didn't find anything, but she goes, I just don't like this. And so we did another surgery and she found the teeniest, tiniest tumor I think anyone has ever found. Like everybody sings her praises in my area because she has that extra sense. That's something.
She listens to it.
Oh my God, I love her. So, and I remember like, I'm pretty much like a layperson, but totally into like medical stuff.
Yeah.
And so I talk to doctors differently and I'm logical. I'm a tech writer. So I take information differently. So when she told me that she found something, she sat me down and she's like, well, we found something. And I was like, oh yeah. Cause like, that's what they were looking for, Right. And I was like, that's cool. What do we do? And she was like, are you okay? Cause usually I have to give people like an Ativan or something. And I'm like, well, no, that's what all this was about. Like, thank God you found it. Like, I'm really grateful. So I went through only radiation, which is such a gift, not chemo.
Right.
And the whole time I was doing it, I had this really positive attitude, which I just saw a great future. And I used to talk to my cells. I did that. And I didn't really read that anywhere. I mean, I didn't have a lot of details about it. I just did it intuitively because I understand the mind-body connection. So I talked to them. I pictured them. I was like, we're all in this together. I sent love to them. And recently I do this like heart thing where you put your hand on your heart and you feel gratitude, but you also send love to yourself, to every cell. And I'm not saying that I don't really know definitively what it did, but even my radiologist said, I see people do better and bounce back better who have attitudes like you, like they don't have a whole lot of data about it, but they do know because they see it. And that was very powerful for me, like that whole experience.
Yeah. And it is healing. And the sect of medicine is called integrative medicine, embraces that kind of thing much more, like the visualization. Even visualization, you can make whatever you want, whatever kind of imagery, people can even like heal their bodies just by doing that kind of thing,
And it's a shame that we don't, teach that more. But like you said, in this environment, which is kind of toxic, pollution wise, and, what we're putting in our bodies, it's a little bit harder to do that. So as you unpeel the onion, there's so many things that you need to change about how you eat and how you live and what you ingest and where you live. It's overwhelming because where we are right now as a society and, kind of like civilization, it's not real healthy. So it can be kind of overwhelming for people. I was going to tell you too, that when my husband got COVID and I knew I probably had it, I was visualizing big time. I was talking to my cells big time. And I was like, look, this is going to come knocking. We don't have to let it in. We don't have to let this in. We've had the booster, and I pictured like the cell wall, like saying, no, thanks. We don't need this.
Right.
I was picturing like that modified RNA, like doing its job.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I still got sick. I got a positive test, but I never got very sick.
Right.
So did that work? I don't know. I know Moderna works a little better. He had Pfizer and I had Moderna. Who knows? And what I love about my doctor, my oncologist, I saw her a couple of days ago, and I said, yeah, who knows? I said, I think maybe the Moderna made a difference. Who knows? And she goes, we don't know. Like, I love when she's like one of the best doctors I know. And she's like, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
She goes, in 10 years, when the research comes out, we'll know.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
Right.
Like
in retrospect.
She said, somebody goes, I have COVID. Did that help me get cancer? She goes, we don't know. I just thought that was so refreshing.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, we will know a lot more, when we look back and can connect some dots,
So I want to get back to you.
Okay.
I'm really intrigued by the future that you see for yourself. What's in your future? What do you see yourself doing?
Okay.
As you move along your path.
Right. So initially when I stepped into lifestyle medicine because, again, a lot of information that we didn't know that I now know for healing the body, and then in combination with what I know holistically now, and want to grow that even more. But so my initial thing that I was going for was to have an online business, an online health coaching business that would include one-to-one group coachings. Also included all the lifestyle medicine stuff, as well as the pillars of lifestyle medicine are things like nutrition and exercise and not smoking and all that kind of stuff. But also, in addition to that, I have in my signature program, religion and spirituality and, mind body practices, things like that just, I feel like, enhance all of that. So my thought was I really wanted to have some geographical freedom because I wanted to travel, and enrich my life that way, have abundance, but also to be able to provide good information for people. And what's happened in the meantime also is that I've met a number of other people that are like-minded and also have said, why don't you do stuff for our community? And I'm like, that's a great idea too. Ooh. So now my thought is maybe some kind of a hybrid of, I do some part-time things in my community, right? To have where we can be live and in person, that I can work with some people. And like I said before, I'm going to be working at a wellness spa, doing a couple of days of health coaching, right? Or health and holistic coaching, and trying to grow this online business. And I'm going to be partnering with a couple of people in that space so that, when I first went into this whole thing, I thought I have to know all of it. I have to teach everybody all of it. The why of, finding your why, all the mind body tools, how to cook, like I need to know all of it. But now I'm realizing I don't have to know all of it. I can kind of focus in on some things that are the best parts of what I know, how I can reach people, how I can teach, how I can help people transform. And then somebody else can maybe teach how to do it in the kitchen, like.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And maybe when you do your local thing, maybe you'll find people that, have those other pieces, and you can perhaps do things together. And so then you'll have that bigger impact.
Right. Yep. A few of us have discussed having like a day-long event or a retreat. But, with COVID, that's been hard. Of course, I'm in Florida where we've been open for business for a while, but gosh. We kind of act like it's not going on.
Yes, but I do know that. Yes.
Still, what we do is, as we've opened up more, people are more comfortable coming together. So I think that will come to fruition in the near future, maybe in the next 6-8 months, more of something cool we could do.
I see you doing like a summit. Like they call them summits. I can see you do. I just feel like you're on fire. I think you're going to do great.
Well, thank you. Because sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Sometimes it feels like you're in the trenches, trying to make a difference. And am I even doing anything for anybody?
It's hard when you're alone. If you're alone with it, it's a little bit, the journey's lonely, and it takes time. It takes time, and you have to trust. Like you said, you just don't give up. Like I'm sort of pivoting my podcast, and I'll figure it out when I figure it out. But that's so lovely that this all happened because I took a course with Kathy Heller, who has a really successful podcast, and she gave us her attention live, like so much. It was amazing. And she taught about mindset. A lot of it was not about having a podcast, although they did cover that and they had a tech person, but it was more about success mindset and the mindset that you have to have and believing in yourself and abundance and that whole, like the stuff I see everywhere now, but I wasn't really plugged in. I had just like sort of danced around it before that. Well, she just like radically shifted my head and I'll never be the same again. And it's lovely because in the past, I would have started something perhaps and then just said, it's not for me. And because I didn't tell anyone, I had no accountability. Nobody knew. And I would feel like a failure. I'd be like, oh, I just can't make this work. I've learned such a different way now. And I think it's so great. I hear more and more people saying, well, failure is like just, little failures are stepping stones. It means you're moving along and you just pivot and the only secret to it is to not give up.
Right.
And I think I hear that over and over. I tend to have a lot of entrepreneurs on my podcast, which I never intended. Again, you've got to follow where things go. But they have the most interesting stories and they can help people overcome not only their own entrepreneurial journeys, but just how to deal with when life throws you a curveball. They have great examples of persistence and not giving up. And what a simple thing that is. Just don't give up.
Right. And so I think that's maybe what I struggle with or have struggled with. And I started my own podcast recently and I'm thinking just one tile.
Oh, I didn't know that.
One tile after the other, and just see what unfolds and be open to whatever unfolds. And
that's hard to live when you've lived your whole life the other way, but it works better. It works better. Yeah. So what is your podcast called?
So it is called The Return to Vibrant Health.
I love that.
And my original intention was to bring lifestyle medicine to the masses, but to also infuse the holistic perspective and have it be expansive as well. Because, I will say that the American College of Lifestyle Medicine I'm a part of really wants to bring evidence-based interventions to people. And I totally agree with that and am on board with that. I mean, that's very important, especially in our medical realm right now, and getting some of these things covered, like nutrition, that might not have been before, so those things are very important. But I also love the other parts of mind-body medicine, of compassion, of all these other, maybe more esoteric or things that maybe our science hasn't caught up with yet that you can't prove. I love those things because they are very powerful as well. So the podcast was meant to bring lifestyle medicine to the masses, because every day I'm telling people you can reverse your heart disease. And they're like, I've never heard that before. So to bring that information to people and also infuse what I call the woo-woo stuff, because that's what I like. That's what I'm into. But it's also when you start, like you said, when you start talking to somebody about it, you realize that they have their own stories, even if you only believe in yourself, you still believe in something. It's yourself, but I don't know. I just wanted to bring this information to people and in the process, raise my own consciousness, like continue to expand that and my world and help other people do the same thing.
I love that. Well, I think you're going to be successful at it, judging by everything I've learned from you and everything you reminded me of in my own life. This is a two-parter, I think.
Right. That's okay. I told you I like to talk.
Well, I do too. Thank you again, Susie Spell, for a spell-binding conversation. You got me talking about things I haven't shared with my audience because you are just so full of interesting ideas and insights. You've read so many cool books. I'm going to try to remember them and put them in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of yourself. I think that people are really excited and ready to learn more. And that's so wonderful. I think the healing that you're going to do, well, it's going to be pretty amazing. I see a future for you. And I just love to hear about your transformation. I think others will love it too. So thank you so much. And to the rest of you, I'll see you soon on the Storied Human.